Hey, children. Uh, this this is a chapter from Against the Nation, Anti-National Politics in Germany by Robert Ogman. This is chapter 3 of the book, which is titled German Nationalism After Reunification. The anti-national left emerged in the distinct political juncture of 1989 to 1990 through its confrontations with a nationalist resurgence following the opening of the Berlin Wall. In this context, nationalism came to strongly influence state and international politics, civil society, and the emerging forms of collective identity. To understand the anti-national positions at this time, it is therefore important to look at these societal shifts in the early 1990s. New section. Germany's new international role. The collapse of the Berlin Wall is often cited as a pivotal event in the unraveling of the post-war era. With the collapse of the East-West order, a political conjuncture emerged concerning the future of the European order. West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl's efforts to unite East and West Germany came to play a central role in the new configuration of the European political geography. In this juncture, Germany became a major power in European and international affairs. Wikipedia says, Helmut Kohl lived from 1930 to 2017. Helmut Kohl was a German politician who served as Chancellor of Germany from 1990 to 1998, and prior to German reunification, as the Chancellor of West Germany from 1982 to 1990. Helmut Kohl was leader of the German Christian Democratic Union, CDU, from 1973 to 1998, and oversaw the end of the Cold War, the German reunification, and the creation of the European Union. Helmut Kohl's 16-year tenure is the longest of any German chancellor since Otto von Bismarck, and is the longest for any democratically elected chancellor of Germany. Born in Ludwigshafen to a Catholic family, Kohl joined the CDU in 1946 at the age of 16. Kohl earned a PhD at Heidelberg University in 1958 and worked as a business executive before becoming a full-time politician. Helmut Kohl was elected as the youngest member of the Parliament of Rhineland-Palatinate in 1959, and from 1969 to 1976 was Minister of the Rhineland-Palatinate State, or Palatinata is probably maybe how you say it. I don't know. Viewed during the 1960s and the early 1970s as a progressive within the CDU, Helmut Kohl was elected national chairman of the party in 1973. After he had become party leader, Helmut Kohl was increasingly seen as a more conservative figure. In 1976 and 1980 federal elections, Helmut Kohl's party performed well, but the social liberal government of Social Democrat Helmut Schmidt was able to remain in power. After Schmidt had lost the support of the federal FDP in 1982, Helmut Kohl was elected chancellor through a constructive vote of no confidence, forming a coalition government with the FDP. Helmut Kohl chaired the G7 in 1985 and 1992. Sorry, that's disgusting, but I have a cold. As Chancellor, Kohl was committed to European integration, and especially to the Franco-German relationship. Kohl was also a steadfast ally of the United States and supported Ronald Reagan's more aggressive policies to weaken the Soviet Union. Following the revolutions of 1989, Helmut Kohl's government acted decisively, culminating in the German reunification in 1990. Helmut Kohl and French President François Mitterrand were the architects of the Maastricht Treaty, which established the EU and the euro currency. Kohl was also a central figure in the Eastern enlargement of the EU, and Helmut Kohl's government led the effort to push for international recognition of Croatia, Slovenia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina when the states declared independence. Helmut Kohl played an instrumental role in resolving the Bosnian War. Domestically, Kohl's policies from 1990 focused on integrating former East Germany into reunified Germany, and Helmut Kohl moved the federal capital from the, quote, provisional capital, Bonn, back to Berlin, although he never resided there because the government offices were only relocated in 1999. Helmut Kohl also greatly increased federal spending on arts and culture. After Helmut Kohl's chancellorship, Helmut Kohl became honorary chairman of the CDU in 1998, but resigned from the position in 2000 in the wake of the CDU donation scandal, which damaged Helmut Kohl's reputation domestically. Kohl received the 1988 Charlemagne Prize and was named honorary citizen of Europe by the European Council in 1998. Following Kohl's death, Helmut Kohl was honored with the first ever European Act of State in Strasbourg. Helmut Kohl was described as, quote, the greatest European leader of the second half of the 20th century, end quote, by U.S. Presidents George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. Back to the text. The economic and political benefits of the unification of West Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany, or FRG, and East Germany, the German Democratic Republic, GDR, grossly outweigh the state's budgetary costs of this fusion. With the incorporation of the eastern territories of the former GDR, the Federal Republic acquired, quote, a much wider market and greatly expanded opportunities to evade the labor market rigidities that have depressed German economic performance in a new division of labor, where low-value processes are outsourced by German firms, end quote. Footnote. See Stephen Paget, William E. Patterson, and Gordon Smith's book, Developments in German Politics. 3. Published with Palgrave in 2003. One second. Wanted to read the description for this book. The description for Developments in German Politics, published in 2003, edited by Stephen Paget, William E. Patterson, and Gordon Smith, says, once the miracle economy of the continent, Germany now staggers under the massive cost burden of unification while it struggles to come to terms with global economic change. Failure to confront the underlying economic weaknesses discredited political institutions and patterns of political behavior that were once regarded as the, quote, efficient secret, end quote, of economic success. The country stands at the crossroads between economic reform and a spiral of economic decline with unpredictable fallout. Bringing together entirely new chapters by leading authorities in the field, Developments in German Politics examines the unfolding crisis of German political economy, its repercussions for polity, politics, and policy, and the consequences for Germany's role in Europe and the wider world. Like its predecessor, the book will be of interest to all concerned with European politics and will be necessary reading for students of German politics and society. Back to the text. End footnote. The political benefits included, quote, pushing the border of Western Europe further eastwards and creating a zone of stability on Germany's eastern flank, end quote. Footnote. Ibid. To the Paget, Patterson, and Gordon Smith developments in German Politics 3. End footnote. These economic advantages pushed the world's third largest economy to become, quote, the leading power within the European Union, end quote. Furthermore, the FRG moved away from advanced general European interest, quote, and became much readier to advance an explicit national interest, end quote, in the name of international politics. This territorial expansion of the Federal Republic of Germany and its corresponding growth in international political and economic influence was met with trepidation amongst some of the leading political powers, not to mention its bordering countries. The United Kingdom's Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and the French President François Mitterrand feared that a more powerful Germany might seek to retake territories lost in World War II, or that it might be too economically competitive in Eastern Europe following the collapse of the Iron Curtain. Footnote. See the article by Michael Binion. Thatcher told Gorbachev Britain did not want German reunification, published in the Times Outline on September 11, 2009, and Karsten Folkery's article, The Iron Lady's Views on German Reunification, published with Der Spiegel Online on September 11, 2009. End footnote. Additionally, the disappearance of the Soviet Union would mean the loss of a bulwark against these possibilities. The return to full sovereignty following 4 decades of close U.S. and Soviet Union supervision was followed by Germany's development into an independent global power. New section. National and post-national politics and identity. The political unification, that is, the establishment of the single German nation state out of East and West Germany, was accompanied by the reemergence of the role of, quote, the national, end quote, in social, political, and economic life domestically. It played a central role in constructing a collective German identity and the concomitant reformulation of historical narratives, forming a public discourse to legitimize certain political and economic policies, and demarcating lines of social exclusion, including the use of physical violence in civil society against perceived, quote, outsiders. The political juncture of 1989 saw collective identity in Germany transforming from what many described as a, quote, post-national identity into an affirmative, quote, ethnic national identity. The, quote, post-national collective identity was rooted in the international role the Federal Republic played in the West, the Westbindung, and the European community, and the European Union, at that time the European community. Sorry, I was looking, I don't see anything for Westbindung. The, quote, post-national collective identity was rooted in the international role the Federal Republic played in the West, the Westbindung, and the European Union, at the time, the European community, as well as the economic affluence of the West German population. Quote, in the founding decades of the Federal Republic, the Federal Republic's identity was profoundly affected by the Federal Republic's commitment to European integration. European integration acted as a very powerful force on a divided and defeated Germany, seeking to reestablish its capacity to act internationally in order to lift the restrictions placed upon it after the war. It saw in European integration a policy which would give its neighbors enough confidence to lift these provisions. An export-oriented economic structure gave West Germany a fundamental interest in the creation of frameworks for opening up trade at the European level. End quote. And that is again from Developments in German Politics, Book 3, or Developments in German Politics 3. End footnote. The post-national identity amongst the population was also due to the country's post-war, quote, economic miracle, end quote. Quote, economic growth helped internally to strengthen popular attachments to the Federal Republic, initially conditional on economic success. These gradually diffused into a more fundamental allegiance to the West German state. Those attachments were, quote, post-national, and in part projected outward into, quote, Europe. This Europeanized state identity increasingly resonated in affiliated terms as both mass and at both mass and elite level. End quote. Again, Paget et al. Developments in German Politics 3. According to Wikipedia, the German economic miracle, or the Wirtschaftswunder, also known as the Miracle on the Rhine, was the rapid reconstruction and development of the economies of West Germany and Austria after World War II. The expression referring to this phenomenon was first used by the Times in 1950. Beginning with the replacement of the Reichsmark with the Deutsche Mark in 1948 as a legal tender, as legal tender, the shilling was similarly reestablished in Austria. A lasting era of low inflation and rapid industrial growth was overseen by the government led by West German Chancellor Konrad Adenauer and Konrad Adenauer's Minister of Economics, Ludwig Erhard, who went down in history as the, quote, father of the West German economic miracle, end quote. In Austria, efficient labor practices led to a similar period of economic growth. The era of economic growth raised West Germany and Austria from total wartime devastation to developed nations in modern Europe. At the founding of the European Common Market in 1957, West Germany's economic growth stood in contrast to the struggling conditions at the time in the United Kingdom. Back to the text. While there were positive sanctions contributing to the development of a post-national identity, including European integration and economic affluence, there were also negative restrictions preventing the public affirmation of a German national identity in the Federal Republic. These included taboos and repression, due to the shadow cast by the connection between German nationalism and racial persecution, genocide, and to military conquest during the National Socialist period. The process of denazification, Western re-education programs, and the Nuremberg and Auschwitz trials all contributed to weakening public affirmation of a German national identity, even as such expressions did not disappear. One second. Wikipedia says denazification was an Allied initiative to rid German and Austrian society, culture, press, economy, judiciary, and politics of the Nazi ideology following the Second World War. Denazification was carried out by removing those who had been Nazi Party or SS members from positions of power and influence, by disbanding or rendering impotent the organizations associated with Nazism, and by trying prominent Nazis for war crimes in the Nuremberg trials of 1946. The program of denazification was launched after the end of the war and was solidified by the Potsdam Agreement in August 1945. The term denazification was first coined as a legal term in 1943 by the Pentagon intended to be applied in a narrow sense with reference to the post-war German legal system. However, it took on a broader meaning. In late 1945 and early 1946, the emergence of the Cold War and the economic importance of Germany caused the United States in particular to lose interest in the program, somewhat mirroring the reverse course in American-occupied Japan. The British handed over denazification panels to the Germans in January 1946, while the Americans did likewise in March 1946. The French ran the mildest denazification effort. Denazification was carried out in an increasingly lenient and lukewarm way until being officially abolished in 1951. Additionally, denazification was hugely unpopular in West Germany, where many Nazis maintained positions of power. Denazification was opposed by the new West German government of Konrad Adenauer, who declared that ending the process was necessary for German rearmament. On the other hand, denazification in East Germany was considered a critical element of the transformation into a socialist society, and the country was stricter in opposing Nazism than its counterpart. However, not all former Nazis faced judgment. Doing special tasks for the occupation governments could protect Nazi members from prosecution, enabling them to continue working and in some cases reach prominence, as did special connections with the occupiers. One of the most notable cases involved Werner von Braun, who was among other German scientists recruited by the United States through Operation Paperclip and later occupied key positions in the American space program. Back to the text. Wikipedia says the Auschwitz trial began on November 24th, 1947 in Krakow, I'm not sure, when Poland's Supreme National Tribunal tried 40 former staff of the Auschwitz concentration camps. The trials ended on December 22nd, 1947. The best-known defendants were Arthur Liebehenschel, former commandant, Maria Mandel, head of the Auschwitz women's camp, and SS Dr. Johann Kremer. 37 other SS officers, 33 men and 4 women who had served as guards or doctors in the camps were also tried. Back to the text. Additionally, the revolt of the 1960s of student movements against the continuities between the Nazi period and the post-war Federal Republic, particularly regarding government and business personnel, further prevented, quote, the national, end quote, from playing a significant role in public discourses towards the legitimation of public policy and of collective identity. Footnote. See Hans Kundani, Utopia or Auschwitz, Germany's 1968 Generation in the Holocaust, published in 2009, and Norbert Frey's Jugend, Revolt und globaler Protest, published in 2008. I'm going to look this book up. Kundani, excuse me. Kundani, Utopia, or, okay. Utopia or Auschwitz, Germany's 1968 Generation by Hans Kundnani, published in 2009's description says, one thing above all separated the radical students who demonstrated on the streets of West Berlin and Frankfurt in 1968 from their counterparts elsewhere around the world. The young Germans who became known as the 1968 Generation, or the Ausstandseger, had grown up knowing that their parents were responsible for Nazism, and in particular for the Holocaust, whether directly or indirectly. Germany's 1968 generation did not merely dream of a better world as some of their contemporaries in other countries did. They felt compelled to act to save Germany from itself. It was an all-or-nothing choice, utopia or Auschwitz. However, although many in the West German student movement imagined their struggle against capitalism as a kind of ex post facto resistance against Nazism, they also had a tendency to relativize the Holocaust. Others, meanwhile, wanted to draw a line under the Nazi past. In fact, despite the anti-fascist rhetoric of the Achtung-Siger, there were also nationalist and anti-Semitic currents in the West German New Left that grew out of the student movement. In short, the 1968 generation had a deeply ambivalent relationship with the Nazi past. Utopia or Auschwitz explores the contradictory currents these contradictory currents, as it traces the political journey of Germany's 1968 generation via the left-wing terrorism of the 70s and the Social Democrats and Greens in the 80s to political power in the 90s in the form of the first ever, quote, red-green government in Germany. It examines the, quote, red-green government's foreign policy, and in particular its response to the Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq crises, which reflected the 1968 generation's ambivalent relationship with the Nazi past. And the other book, Norbert Frye, 1968. This Norbert Frye book, which of course is in German. Let's see if I can get a translation of the description here. I'm not seeing any description. Come on. Yeah, I'm not finding any real descriptions of this. Sorry about that. Okay, back to the text. Where were we? New section. While efforts to reestablish an affirmative national identity were undertaken throughout the immediate post-war decades, it was the opening of the Berlin Wall that shifted the terrain, producing new conditions for an affirmative national identity. Footnote. Two examples from the 1980s were the Bitburg incident and the historians' dispute. think the Bitburg incident was when like the Helmut Kohl took Ronald Reagan to visit a graveyard that was full of Nazi Wehrmacht soldiers. Wikipedia says the Bitburg controversy concerned a ceremonial visit by Ronald Reagan, the incumbent president of the United States, to a German military cemetery in Bitburg, West Germany, in May 1985. The visit was intended to commemorate the 40th anniversary of the end of World War II in Europe, but aroused considerable criticism from Jewish communities within the United States and around the world when it became known that 49 out of the 2,000 German soldiers buried at the site had been members of the Waffen-SS. Sorry, so not Wehrmacht soldiers. Waffen-SS, the military arm of the Nazis' Schutzstaffel, SS. The entire SS had been judged to be a criminal organization at the Nuremberg trials. Although not part of the original itinerary, as part of their own reconciliatory gesture, Reagan and West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl made an impromptu visit to the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp before visiting Bitburg, thus reducing the time Reagan had to spend at Kulme Schua military cemetery, to only 8 minutes. And the historians' dispute, or the Historikerstreit, was a dispute in the late 1980s in West Germany between conservative and left-of-center academics and other intellectuals about how to incorporate Nazi Germany and the Holocaust into German historiography, and more generally into the German people's view of themselves. The dispute was initiated with the Bitburg controversy, which related to a commemorative service at a German military cemetery where members of the Waffen-SS were buried. The service was attended by President of the United States Ronald Reagan, who had been invited by the West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. The Bitburg ceremony was widely interpreted in Germany as the beginning of the, quote, normalization of the nation's Nazi past, and inspired a slew of criticisms and defenses that made up the initiating arguments of the Historikerstreit. The dispute quickly outgrew the initial context of the Bitburg controversy, however, and became a series of broader historiographic, political, and critical debates about how the episode of the Holocaust should be understood in Germany's history and identity. The position taken by conservative intellectuals, most prominently Ernst Nolte, was that the Holocaust was not unique and therefore Germans should not bear any special burden of guilt for the, quote, final solution to the Jewish question, end quote. Nolte argued that there was no moral difference between the crimes of the Soviet Union and those of Nazi Germany, and that the Nazis acted as they did out of fear of what the Soviet Union might do to Germany. Others argued that the memory of the Nazi era could not be, quote, normalized and be a source of national pride, and that it echoed Nazi propaganda. Other central questions and topics debated within the dispute included the singularity of the Holocaust, the functionalist and intentionalist models of the Holocaust, methodological approaches to historiography, the political utility of history, the question of whether the Holocaust ought to be studied comparatively, and ethics of public commemorations of history. The debate attracted much attention in West Germany, with its participants frequently giving television interviews and writing op-ed pieces in newspapers. It flared up again briefly in 2000 when Nolte, one of its leading figures, was awarded the Konrad Adenauer Prize for Science. And, that sounds, the CDU, the Conservative Party of Germany, being so vehemently against denazification in West Germany, it makes sense that, in a sense, a certain quasi-apologist for Nazism, like Nolte, I think Nolte actually holds even more extreme view. I think he might have held it as, I'm not exactly sure, I might be talking out of ass, but I think Nolte might even hold the view that, like, Nazism was like a necessary bulwark against Bolshevism. I'm not sure if that's entirely true. I might be talking out my butthole, but I think that's true. So it would make sense that someone like Nolta would win the Konrad Adenauer Prize. When it seems like the CDU, maybe I'm wrong about this, was the kind of like only legal way to represent right-wing politics in the Germany of the Federal Republic of Germany. I don't know. Maybe that's maybe I'm stretching it too far, but I don't think I am. Back to the text. The Bitburg incident was the meeting between German Chancellor Helmut Kohl and U.S. President Ronald Reagan in 1985 at the graves of SS soldiers at the military cemetery in Bitburg, in which a symbolic reconciliation took place. The historians' dispute involved the attempt amongst conservative historians to rehabilitate the period of National Socialism by portraying the Third Reich as a mere response to and defense against Stalinism and the Soviet Union. See, that's what I was talking about. See, Ogman backs me up here, so I'm a genius. I think that's what the main thing we've learned today is that I'm a genius and everyone's stupid but me and Robert Ogman. You know what? Not even Robert Ogman, just me. Anyway, back to the text. Where am I? Come on. New section. Reunification and national identity. With the collapse of the post-war order and the subsequent unification of East and West Germany, a process helped by the opening of the Berlin Wall, quote, the nation quickly reappeared in public discourses, which in some cases was observed by the international press with alarm. A pivotal yet often overlooked example of this process of, quote, nationalization is the transformation of the East German opposition movement from a left democratic movement into one with aspirations for national unification. The protests by students, youth, and workers sought basic democratic rights, such as freedom of speech, press, and assembly, as well as independent trade unions and women's organizations. The main organization, titled Neues Forum, sought a grassroots democratic praxis for transforming the social structure from below. According to Wikipedia, New Forum, or in German, Neues Forum, was a political movement in East Germany formed in the months leading up to the collapse of the East German state. Neues Forum was founded on the 9th of September 1989 and was the first independent, non-national front political movement to be recognized by the Socialist Unity Party of Germany-led state on the 8th of November 1989. In February 1990, it formed Alliance 90, Bündnis 90, with Democracy Now!, Demokratie Jetzt, DJ, and the Initiative for Peace and Human Rights, Initiative für Frieden und Menschenrechte, IFM. The New Forum was the first countrywide political movement in the GDR outside the Protestant Church. Members of the peace movement included Bärbel Bohley, I think that's how you say EYs in German, Bohley, I think that's Bohley is how you say that, because I know the one philosopher, I think it's Wilhelm Dilthey. It looks like Wilhelm Dilthey. I don't know. I'm taking my best guess. Ingrid Kupa, Rolf Henrich, Jens Reich, and Reinhard Meinl signed the Aufbruch 89, Initiative 1989, or Initiative 89, founding proclamation on the 9th and 10th of September 1989 in Grünheide, which had been the last home of the dissident Robert Havemann. Was Havemann? Sorry. New Forum demanded a dialogue about democratic reforms with the aim, together with the largest possible participation from the population, of, quote, reshaping, end quote, society. Back to the text. The original slogan of the movement was Wir sind das Volk. We are the people. A democratic statement demanding the government represent and be held accountable to the people. But in Leipzig, the democratic spirit quickly mutated into a movement for national unification under the slogan, quote, Wir sind ein Volk. We are one people. We are one people. Footnote. See Paul Hakanos, Free to Hate, The Rise of the Right in Post-Communist Eastern Europe. I'm going to look that book up. Free to Hate. The description for Free to Hate, which was published in... I don't know what year. Oh, to say 1992. Says... combining first-hand reporting, original documentation, and political analysis, Free to Hate by Paul Hakanos is the first major work in English to investigate the rise of the ultra-nationalist and radical right-wing movements that have been sweeping Central and Eastern Europe since 1989. In this powerful volume, Paul Hakanos provides an account of the emergence and contemporary relevance of far-right movements in countries including Germany, Hungary, Romania, and Poland. In addition, he discusses neo-Nazi youth subcultures, anti-Semitism, racism, minority issues, and the revision of history in the post-communist states. Back to the text. End footnote. This conflict at the level of civil society between the original demand for democratic reform and the later aspirations for national unification were paralleled in the conflict over the process of political unification. In a highly visible article published in Die Zeit in early 1990, German political philosopher and public intellectual Jürgen Habermas warned that the unification of East and West Germany was a delicate process in which a conflict existed with two possible outcomes. According to Habermas, one could nurture and support the, quote, Republican constitutional patriotism, end quote, that was developed in the old Federal Republic by pursuing a democratic path towards unification. This was possible by means of referendum, directly involving citizens of East and West Germany. This option was constitutionally possible by the use of Article 146 of the Basic Law of 1949. Wikipedia says, the Basic Law for the Federal Republic of Germany is the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Germany. The West German Constitution was approved in Bonn on the 8th of May 1949 and came into effect on the 23rd of May, after having been approved by the occupying Western Allies of World War II on the 12th of May. It was termed, quote, Basic Law, Grundgesetz, to indicate that it was a provisional piece of legislation pending the reunification of Germany. However, when reunification took place in 1990, the Basic Law was retained as the definitive constitution of reunified Germany. Its original field of application, Geltungsbereich, that is, the states that were initially included in the Federal Republic of Germany consisted of the three Western Allied zones of occupation, but at the insistence of the Western Allies, formally excluded West Berlin. In 1990, the 2+4 agreement between the two parts of Germany and all four allies stipulated the implementation of a number of amendments. The German word Grundgesetz may be translated as either basic law or fundamental law. The term, quote, constitution, Verfassung, was avoided as the drafters regarded Grundgesetz as an interim arrangement for a provisional West German state, expecting that an eventual reunified Germany would adopt a proper constitution, enacted under the provisions of Article 146 of the Basic Law, which stipulates that such a constitution must be, quote, freely adopted by the German people, end quote. Nevertheless, although the amended Basic Law was approved by all four Allied powers in 1990, who thereby relinquished their reserved constitutional rights, it was never submitted to a popular vote, neither in 1949 nor in 1990. However, the Basic Law as passed in 1949 also contained Article 23, which provided for, quote, other parts of Germany, end quote, to, quote, join the area of applicability of the Basic Law, end quote, which was the provision that was used for German reunification from the constitutional standpoint, as the overwhelming consensus thereafter was that the German question was settled, and to reaffirm the renunciation of any residual German claim to land east of the Oder and Neisse. Article 23 was repealed the same day as reunification came into force. An unrelated article on the relationship between Germany and the European Union was instead inserted in its place 2 years later. As a heritage of the lesser German solution, neither was unification with Austria aspired for. In the preamble to the Basic Law, its adoption was declared as an action of the, quote, German people, and Article 20 states, quote, all state authority is derived from the people. These statements embody the constitutional principles that, quote, Germany is identical with the German people, and that the German people act constitutionally as the primary institution of the German state, where the Basic Law refers to the territory under the jurisdiction of this German state. It refers to it as the, quote, federal territory, so avoiding any inference of there being a constitutionally defined, quote, German national territory. The authors of the Basic Law sought to ensure that a potential dictator would never again be able to come to power in the country. Although some of the Basic Law is based on the Weimar Republic's constitution, the first article is a protection of human dignity, quote, Menschenwürde, and human rights. They are core values protected by the Basic Law. The principles of democracy, republicanism, social responsibility, federalism, and rule of law are key components of the Basic Law. Article 20, Articles 1 and 20 are protected by the so-called Eternity Clause. Article 79(3), that prohibits any sort of change or removal of the principles laid down in Articles 1 and 20. Back to the text. Instead, the Helmut Kohl government preferred, quote, annexation, based on Article 23 of the Basic Law, which gave the Federal Republic the right to incorporate, quote, other German lands, end quote, into the FRG, the Federal Republic's territory. Habermas argued that this course represented national domination over the citizens of East Germany, encouraged national chauvinism, and threatened the post-national collective identity. Habermas spoke of the, quote, non-nationalistic self-understanding, end quote, that had developed in West Germany in the previous decades. Many feared these developments might occur at the level of both state and civil society. Author Günter Grass outright opposed reunification out of the fear that, quote, a reunified Germany would be a colossus laden with complexes which would stand in the way of itself and of the unification of Europe, end quote. Günter Grass published an article, Rede des Schriftsteller Günter Grass auf dem Parteitag der SPD in Berlin, 18th of December 1989, published in Alice Alter's edited volume Nationalismus, Documenta zur Geschichte und Gegenwart eines Phänomens, published in 1994. Wikipedia says Günter Grass lived from 1927 to 2015 and was a German novelist, poet, playwright, illustrator, graphic artist, sculptor, and recipient of the 1999 Nobel Prize in Literature. Günter Grass was born in the free city of Danzig, now Gdansk, Poland. At age 17, Günter Grass was drafted into the military and served from late 1944 in the Waffen-SS. Günter Grass was taken as a prisoner of war by U.S. forces at the end of the war in May 1945. Günter Grass was released in April 1946. Trained as a stonemason and sculptor, Grass began writing in the 1950s. In his fiction, he frequently returned to the Danzig of his childhood. Grass is best known for his first novel, The Tin Drum, published in 1959, a key text in European magic realism. The Tin Drum was the first book of his Danzig trilogy, the other two being Cat and Mouse and Dog Years. Günter Grass's work are frequently considered to have a left-wing political dimension, and Grass is an active supporter of the Social Democratic Party of Germany. The Tin Drum was adapted as a film of the same name, which won both the 1979 Palme d'Or and the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. In 1999, the Swedish Academy awarded Grass the Nobel Prize in Literature, praising Grass as a writer, quote, whose frolicsome black fables portray the forgotten face of history, end quote. And what was the other thing I wanted to look up? Peter Alter Nationalismus. Oh, sick. It's actually in English. Nationalism by Peter Alter. Wait, hold on. That's not what I was looking for. It's a book by... Shit. Document... Sorry, I can't find a description of this book. I tried. Anyway. End footnote, back to the text. New section, German ethnic nationalism. While collective identity in the old Federal Republic was often described as post-national, its deeply ethnic character could be seen in the state's definition of German nationality declared in the Basic Law of 1949. It stated, quote, A, German within the meaning of this basic law is a person who possesses German citizenship or has been admitted to the territory of the German Reich within the boundaries of December 31st, 1937, as a refugee or expellee of German ethnic origin, or as the spouse or descendant of such persons. End quote. Footnote. This principle is in contrast with that of ius soli, practiced in many European countries, which grants citizenship to all those born within the state's territory, regardless of ancestry. Oh, it's just solely. That's what it means. I think it's a typo there. Wikipedia says just solely, meaning, quote, right of soil, is the right of anyone born in the territory of a state to nationality or citizenship, also commonly referred to as birthright citizenship in some Anglophone countries, is a rule defining a person's nationality based on their birth in the territory of the country. Jus soli was part of the English common law in contrast to jus sanguinis, quote, right of blood, which derives from the Roman law that influenced civil law systems of mainland Europe. Jus soli is the predominant rule in the Americas. Explanations for this geographical phenomenon include the establishment of lenient laws by past European colonial powers to entice immigrants from the Old World and displace native populations in the New World, along with the emergence of successful wars of independence movements that widened the definition and granting of citizenship as a prerequisite to the abolishment of slavery since the 19th century. Outside the Americas, jus soli is rare. Since the 27th Amendment of the Constitution of Ireland was enacted in 2004, no European country grants nationality based on unconditional or near unconditional jus soli. Almost all states in Europe, Asia, Africa, and Oceania grant nationality at birth based on the principle of jus sanguinis, in which nationality is inherited through parents rather than birthplace, or a restricted version of jus soli in which nationality by birthplace is automatic only for the children of certain immigrants. Jus soli in many cases helps prevent statelessness. Countries that have acceded to the 1961 Convention of the Reduction of Statelessness are obligated to grant nationality to people born in their territory who would otherwise become stateless persons. The American Convention on Human Rights similarly provides that, quote, every person has the right to the nationality of the state in whose territory he was born if he does not have the right to any other nationality, end quote. Back to the text. End footnote. This ius sanguinis. Let's see, I didn't think I would have to look that up, but I'm going to have to. Jus sanguinis. I don't know why I keep saying ius. I don't know, because it's just spelled I-U-I. I don't know. Maybe that's another way of spelling it. Jus sanguinis, meaning, quote, right of blood, is a principle of nationality law by which nationality is determined or acquired by the nationality of one or both parents. Children at birth may be nationals of a particular state if either or both of their parents have nationality of that state. It may also apply to national identities of ethnic, cultural, or other origins. Citizenship can also apply to children whose parents belonged to a diaspora and were not themselves citizens of the state conferring citizenship. Bracket citation needed. This principle contrasts with jus soli, right of soil, which is solely based on the place of birth. In the 21st century, almost all states apply some combination of jus soli and jus sanguinis in their nationality laws to varying degrees, in contrast to largely pure forms of either as used in the 19th or 20th centuries. Historically, the most common application of jus sanguinis is a right of a child to their father's nationality. Today, a majority of countries extend this right on an equal basis to the mother. Some apply this right irrespective of the place of birth, while others may limit it to those born in the state. Some countries provide that a child acquires the nationality of the mother if the father is unknown or stateless, and some irrespective of the place of birth. Some such children may acquire the nationality automatically, while others may need to apply for a parent's nationality. Children acquiring nationality is overseen by various laws. Parents being unmarried can complicate the process of citizenship transmission from father to child. Statelessness can occur, which prevents access to health care rights, education rights, and employment within a country. Offspring of an adult that is experiencing statelessness can inherit this state. However, just solely prevents this from happening. Back to the text. This jus sanguinis, quote, right of blood, end quote, principle meant that German citizenship could only be acquired if one could prove that they are of German descent or that they are the offspring of German citizens. Footnote. Oh shit, I already read the footnote. That's so funny. This definition had, end footnote, this definition had large implications for the patterns of inclusion and exclusion, both during and after 1989, of millions of immigrants based on, quote, ethnic, national, end quote, characteristics. Newcomers defined as belonging to an ethnic German community with vastly different cultural and linguistic characteristics were quickly absorbed. Their integration was well funded by the government, and they found their interests represented in the political realm. In contrast, newcomers from Southern Europe who originally came to West Germany as contract workers, part of the, quote, guest worker, end quote, program, and remained in the country and had families, or who brought their relatives to West Germany afterwards, were denied citizenship along with their children and grandchildren, even those born in the country. Sorry, excuse me. Wikipedia says Gastarbeiter, both singular and plural, are foreign or migrant workers, particularly those who moved to West Germany between 1955 and 1973, seeking work as part of a formal guest work program, Gastarbeiter program. As a result, guest workers are generally considered temporary migrants because their residency in the country of immigration is not yet determined to be permanent. Other countries had similar programs. In the Netherlands and Belgium, it was called the Gastarbeiter program. In Sweden and Denmark and Norway, it was called Arbetskraftsinvandring, workforce immigration. And in East Germany, such workers were called Vertragsarbeiter. The term that was used during the Nazi era was Fremdarbeiter, German for, quote, foreign worker. However, the latter term had negative connotations and was no longer used after World War II. Gastarbeiter is widely used in Russia to refer to foreign workers from post-USSR or third world countries. Back to the text. New section. Citizenship, naturalization, immigration. In addition to this limited definition of citizenship, those seeking German citizenship were faced with a strict naturalization process, requiring a high level of assimilation. According to Simon Green, it required they, quote, give up the majority of their cultural identity in favor of, quote, becoming, not just legally, German, end quote. Where am I? Footnote. I was trying to see if there's anything for Simon Green, but I think the footnote will be more helpful. Um, Simon Green, Towards an Open Society, Citizenship and Immigration in Paget et al.'s Developments in German Politics. I've already looked up that book, so I'm just going to move on. End footnote. Based on the 1977 Guidelines on Naturalization, it, quote, explicitly requires a very high standard of cultural adaptation by an immigrant to include the demand of, quote, voluntary and lasting orientation towards Germany, end quote, end quote. A process which can also only begin after successful integration, which itself was open-ended. This left the FRG, the Federal Republic of Germany, with one of the lowest naturalization rates in Europe, not rising above 0.4% throughout the 1980s. Large numbers of immigrants, often third generation, whose only language was German and whose only residence had ever been the Federal Republic of Germany, lacked German citizenship. This exclusion was compounded by the fact that non-nationals lacked the possibility of acquiring dual citizenship, in contrast to many other European states. Applicants are compelled to choose between German citizenship and that of their parents or grandparents. Another issue related to immigration, and which became the central topic of public debates following the fall of the Berlin Wall, is that of asylum. As a correction to the massive refugee problem caused by the political and, quote, racial persecution of Nazi Germany, the Federal Republic's basic law included the right to asylum. In Article 16, it was declared that, quote, politically persecuted people shall enjoy the right to asylum, end quote. Throughout the 1980s, roughly 70,000 people sought to exercise this right annually. But with the opening of the Berlin Wall in 1989, this number rapidly increased. In the following year, the number of applicants more than doubled to 193,063, the year afterwards adding 60,000 more people to the total, and the year following that jumping above 400,000 applicants. Footnote. See Karen Schoenfelder, Migration, Refugees, and Ethnic Plurality as Issues of Public and Political Debates in West Germany, published in David Cesarani and Mary Fulbrook's edited volume, Citizenship, Nationality, and Migration in Europe. Sorry, I was looking up this book. The description for Citizenship, Nationality, and Migration in Europe by David Cesarani and Mary Fulbrook, published in 1996, says, throughout Europe, long-standing ideas of what it means to be a citizen are being challenged. The sense of belonging to a nation has never been more in flux. Simultaneously, nationalistic and racist movements are gaining ground and barriers are being erected against immigration. This volume examines how concepts of citizenship have evolved in different countries in varying contexts. It explores the interconnection between ideas of the nation, modes of citizenship, and the treatment of migrants. Adopting a multidisciplinary and international approach, this collection brings together experts from several fields including political studies, history, law, and sociology. By juxtaposing 4 European countries, Britain, France, Germany, and Italy, and setting current trends against a historical background, it highlights important differences and exposes similarities in the urgent questions surrounding citizenship and the treatment of minorities in Europe today. Again, that was the description for citizenship, nationality, and migration in Europe, edited by David Cesarani and Mary Fulbrook. Back to the text and footnote. Where am I? An additional component of the transformation of the, quote, national following the fall of the Berlin Wall was the passing of the Ausländer Gesetz. Ausländer Gesetz. The Ausländer Gesetz, translated as the Alien Act, according to Wikipedia, it says, the Wikipedia page says, the German Aliens Act was first passed in 1965, 10 years after the first recruitment agreement with Italy, and when recruitment agreements had already been concluded with 6 other countries. It was replaced by a new version in 1990. It expired on the 31st of December 2004. The Aliens Act was replaced on the 1st of January 2005 by the Residence Act, promulgated as Article 1 of the Immigration Act. Together with the Asylum Procedure Act, today's name Asylum Act, the Aliens Act formed the 2 essential elements of German aliens law. An implementing regulation, DV Aussig, DV Aus IG, was issued for the Aliens Act, which also expired on the 31st of December 2004. Back to the text. On July 9, 1990, the Aliens Act was passed in Parliament. This law only formalized already existing practices in the state's treatment of immigrants, making, quote, the granting and renewal of residence permits subject to the, quote, interest of the Federal Republic of Germany, end quote, end quote. But this meant codification in the boldest terms, that the rights of non-German citizens were subordinate to the national interests of the German state. This could be understood in an expansive and flexible sense, whether according to the labor requirements of the national economy, the maintenance of social peace, just as well as demographic control. It would become fundamental for the social and political conflicts in the following years. New section, National Self-Consciousness and, quote, the other. The public affirmation of a proud and self-conscious German nation that emerged after the opening of the Berlin Wall was accompanied by a strong attack on those deemed not belonging to that, quote, national community. That is, almost as soon as the divisions separating East and West Germany came down, new boundaries were drawn. According to public opinion polls, the number one priority that concerned the West German public following the opening of the Berlin Wall was not that of political unification, but rather that of, quote, foreigners, Ausländer, which is aliens, and asylum. Karen Schoenvelter explains, quote, in June 1991, aliens and asylum rocketed up the scales of themes of Germans. In 1991, aliens and asylum rocketed up the scale of themes Germans regard as important, overtaking unification in the Gulf War to become priority number 1 for the West Germans until February 1992. It returned to that position in the following summer and autumn, end quote. Karen Schoenvelter. A media frenzy developed in which a discourse about the, quote, inundation by foreigners, end quote, Überfremdung, took center stage. Quote, the notion that Germany was being flooded, that millions were about to come from the south and east, and that Germany's affluence, for some even its existence as a nation under threat, had been hammered into the population. This was combined with political campaigns by the conservative CDU and CSU party candidates that employed anti-foreigner rhetoric to garner public support. New section, spike in racial violence. Additionally, citizen protests emerged in numerous West German cities against shelters for asylum seekers. This wave of anti-foreigner sentiment culminated in violent attacks on immigrants and refugees, as well as other minorities. The most extreme cases were the attacks by mobs of German civilians against asylum seekers and foreign contract workers in the cities of Hoyerswerda and Rostock in 1991 and 1992. Hoyerswerda, 1991. Wikipedia says the Hoyers, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Hoyerswerda riots were xenophobic riots that lasted from the 17th to the 23rd of September 1991 in Hoyerswerda, a town in the northeast of Saxony, Germany. The riots started with a group of mainly young neo-Nazis attacking Vietnamese street hawkers. After the intervention of the police, a hostel used mainly by Mozambican contract workers came under attack. In the following night, further riots took place in Hoyerswerda, and foreigners were hurt. On the fourth night, stones and petrol bombs were thrown at an apartment block in Thomas Munzer Strasse that housed asylum seekers. During the clashes, 32 people were hurt and 83 were arrested. After the incidents, the Saxony government evacuated the asylum seekers from Thomas Munzer Strasse, and many contract workers left the town. In 1991, the word Ausländerfrei, free of foreigners, became a synonym for the riot and the, quote, unword of the year in Germany in 1991. The city made efforts to polish its public image and to take action against right-wing radicals. Although the presence of right-wing radicals in the city is less visible, it is still a center of right-wing extremism. In 2006, Jungen Nationaldemokraten, the youth organization of the far-right party, the far-right National Democratic Party of Germany, organized a demonstration to remember the 1991 riots. The police arrested over 50 counter-demonstrators and the demonstration took place. Wikipedia says the Rostock Lichtenhagen riots were violent xenophobic riots that took place in the Lichtenhagen district of Rostock, Germany, from the 22nd to the 24th of August 1992. These are the worst mob attacks against migrants in post-war Germany. Stones and petrol bombs were thrown at an apartment block where asylum seekers lived. At the height of the riots, several hundred militant right-wing extremists were involved. About 3,000 neighborhood onlookers stood by applauding them. The initial response of authorities and politicians was heavily criticized. For some days prior to the riots, veiled warnings of impending trouble had been posted in some newspapers. Police and politicians deemed reluctant to respond, and when they did, their responses were considered inadequate. Outside the building where the refugees were housed, several hundred asylum seekers had been camping for days with little or no access to basic facilities. This was contributing to escalating tensions in the neighborhood. Between the 22nd and 26th of August 1942, there were 370 provisional arrests and 408 preliminary investigations related to the riots. Among the arrests were 110 people from the former West Germany, 217 from the state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, including 147 from Rostock and another 37 from the former East Germany. During the riot, 204 police officers were injured. No one was killed. Back to the text. Footnote. See Roger Carapin, Protest Politics in Germany. Movements on the left and right since the 1960s. The description for that book says, social movements and the protests they spawn are widely regarded as important to the vibrancy of democracy and its ability to respond constructively to change. In the immediate post-war period, West Germany was a, quote, spectator democracy, end quote, with the citizenry largely passive and elites operating mainly through consensus. Beginning with the student demonstrations of the late 1960s, however, Germany experienced waves of left-wing protests that expanded the political agenda and broadened political participation. Later, after the unification of East and West Germany, the country was confronted by new challenges from right-wing groups, which often engaged in violence during the early 1990s. In this book, Roger Carapin carefully examines protest movements on both the left and the right in order to understand how they became large and influential, and why protesters in different conflicts use quite different methods, ranging from conventional participation to nonviolent disruption to violent militancy. Roger Carapin's study of 9 cases of protest includes leftist opposition to urban renewal and nuclear energy policies in the 1970s and 1980s, and rightist opposition to immigration policy in the 1990s. Comparisons of contrasting cases reveal the crucial role played by strategic interaction among protesters, party politicians, and government officials, rather than socioeconomic factors or political institutions, in determining the paths that the movements took. And it says Roger Carapin is professor of political science at Hunter College and the Graduate Center, City University of New York. Back to the text and footnote. In September 1991, the East German city of Hoyerswerda became the site for a week-long pogrom. 4 days long, hundreds of skinheads and other German civilians gathered outside the housing complex of foreign contract workers and under the slogan, quote, foreigners out, successfully drove them out of the city. At the height of these events, up to 100 youth physically assaulted the building with, quote, bottles, chains, clubs, baseball bats, and Molotov cocktails, end quote, threatening to raze it to the ground. The youth were urged on by the crowds of 500 people who shouted racist slogans, cheered on the assailants, and prevented the police from intervening. On the 4th day, the police massed outside the building, and the mob moved on to the site of the asylum seekers' residence across town. Here, a crowd of up to 1,000 people cheered on 50 youths who attacked the building, until local officials removed the refugees, hence allowing the racist attacks to dictate public policy. In another East German city, Rostock, a 5-day-long pogrom in August 1992 was even more intense. Nearly 3,000 supporters cheered on up to 500 attackers, led by West German neo-Nazis and skinheads, the crowd allowing the assaulters to hide amongst them. Attackers stormed the residential complex, setting it on fire and chasing over 100 contract workers out. As a result, the government bussed the contract workers out in the middle of the night, essentially achieving their explicit goal to, quote, get foreigners out, end quote. These attacks were made possible due to the passive response of the police, the national anti-immigrant mood, and the support from local public officials. Where am I? At this time, public opinion polls revealed that more than a third of the population, quote, expressed understanding for violent actions, quote, because of the aliens problem, end quote, end quote. This empathy for the perpetrators rather than the victims was mirrored in the media reports. It was not until November 1992, after the murder of 3 Turkish women in an arson attack in the West German city of Mölln, and when civil society groups organized candlelight memorial marches in numerous cities, that the government made public moves to suppress such violence. Shit. Wikipedia says the Mölln arson attack was the first fatal case of far-right extremists setting fire to migrants' homes in Germany, and one of the earliest cases of right-wing terrorism in the country's post-unification history. On the night of the 22nd of November 1992, 2 German men with neo-Nazi ties set fire to 2 houses of Turkish families in Mölln, in Schleswig-Holstein. 3 Turks died in the attack, while 9 others were injured. Back to the text. Racial attacks spiked out of control during and after 1991, jumping from under 400 incidents in the previous year to 2,720. Footnote. See Roland Roth and Dietrich Rucht's edited volume. Die sozialen Bewegungen in Deutschland, Site 1945. I'll look that up. One second, sorry. Sorry, I'm trying to find this goddamn book. Sorry. Can't find anything for it. Sorry, I know it's annoying. And footnote. Next footnote. Hermann Curtin, Werner Bergman, and Rainer Erb's edited volume, Anti-Semitism and Xenophobia in Germany After Unification. Okay, so Oxford University Press published this book in 1997. And the description says, since unification, Germany has experienced profound changes, including the reawakening of xenophobic hate crime, anti-Semitic incidents, and racist violence. This book presents the most recent research conducted by a team of American and German experts in political science, sociology, mass communication, and history. They analyzed the degrees of anti-Semitism, xenophobia, remembrance, and Holocaust knowledge in German public opinion, the groups and organizations that propagate such prejudice and hate, and the German, American, and Jewish perceptions of and reactions to these phenomena. Back to the text and footnote. Racial attacks spiked out of control during and after 1991, jumping from 400 incidents in the previous year to 2,720. A year later, that number increased by 2,000 incidents and then climbed even further in 1993 to 5,580 incidents. For the next 2 years, that figure dropped by 1,000 incidents each year, leaving it nonetheless at more than 5 times higher than before the fall of the Berlin Wall. Acts specifically categorized as violent also spiked after reunification. Whereas the majority of annual figures for the 1980s were below the 100 level, the average annual figure between 1991 and 1995 was over 1,200, peaking in 1992 to 2,000, quote, violent anti-foreigner incidents, end quote. Right-wing anti-Semitic incidents followed a similar pattern. In the 1980s, the average number of incidents was 289. From reunification to the mid-1990s, that number jumped to 730, reaching a high point in 1994 with 1,366 incidents. It is also significant to note that contrary to the assumption that nationalism, anti-Semitism, and xenophobia are problems limited to the East, roughly twice as many violent assaults from right-wing perpetrators were committed in West Germany per year than in the former Eastern states, although the latter's smaller population meant that they were occurring at twice as high a frequency per capita as in the West. The figures show us that both the frequency and intensity of anti-foreigner and anti-Semitic incidents spiked in the years following German reunification. It did not return to their pre-1989 levels. The spike in racial violence in these years coincided with the emergence of far-right neo-Nazi nationalist political parties and organizations. Membership in right-wing parties, extremist organizations, and skinhead groups increased by 10,000 people between 1980 and 1995, peaking in 1992 to over 40,000 members and falling to just above 30,000 in 1995. In this period, the far-right Republikaner Party nearly tripled its size. In 1989, jumping to 25,000 members and maintaining over 20,000 for the next 5 years. Let's see. The Republicans, the Republikaner Party, is a small German party founded in Munich in 1983 by former members of CSU. It sees itself as right-wing conservative and also describes itself as the, quote, democratic right. From 1992 onwards, the Federal Office for the Protection of the Constitution listed the Republikaner Party under suspicion of right-wing extremist tendencies and monitored it. In 2006, only forces within it, rather than the entire party, were listed as right-wing extremists. Since 2007, the party has no longer been listed in the report of the Office of the Protection of the Constitution. In 1985, Franz Schönhuber succeeded Franz Handlos as party chairman. Franz Schönhuber wanted to move the REP to the right, following the example of the French Front National. In June 1989, the REP entered the European Parliament with over 7% of the vote. In January of that year, they had received only 7.5% of the vote in the election for the Berlin House of Representatives. The Republikaner Party were unable to repeat both successes. In the 1994 European elections, they received 3.9%, and in the election of the Berlin House of Representatives in 1990, shortly after reunification, they received 3.1%. From 1992 to 2001, the REP was represented in the state parliament of Baden-Württemberg. Under the chairmanship of Rolf Schlierer, from 1994 to 2014, the party distanced itself from right-wing extremist tendencies, but lost importance to right-wing extremist parties such as the NPD. Since 2001, Republikaner has only been represented in local parliaments. In the 2016 state election in Baden-Württemberg, it lost its claim to state party funding with a vote share of 0.3%. After 2017, it only ran nationally in the 2021 and 2023 Berlin state elections, where it received only less than 100 votes each time. Back to the text. The total right-wing incidents spiked enormously in 1991, with a jump from 1,848 the previous year to 3,884. The following year, the figure nearly doubled again to 7,684, and then in 1993 spiked above 10,500 incidents. It dipped just under 8,000 incidents in the following 2 years, which in contrast to the figure 10 years previously, meant a 5-fold increase. Between reunification and 2011, more than 180 people lost their lives due to right-wing violence. Footnote. See Aslan Erkal and Nora Venter, Chronik der Gewalt, 182 Todesopfer, Rechtsextremer und rassistischer Gewalt seit 1990. Mut gegen rechte Gewalt, November 23, 2011. New section, Asylum Reform. Following the media campaign and the wave of violence against asylum seekers in the early 1990s, the reverberations were also felt at the level of state policy, with the curbing of asylum seekers' rights. On the 6th of December 1992, the government of the conservative CDU/CSU, the Social Democratic SPD, and the neoliberal FPD passed Article 16A to the Basic Law, the Asylum Compromise, which sharply restricted asylum rights. It reduced the number of asylum seekers through a variety of methods. First, many applications were automatically rejected if the individual originated from a country on the, quote, white list, which was considered to be a, quote, safe country, or if they passed through one of the states bordering Germany, considered a, quote, safe third country. The process of deportations was also sped up with the arranging of a, quote, fast-track procedure at the Frankfurt airport. These measures drastically restricted asylum applicants, dropping the number to fewer than 100,000 in 1998. These transformations of German politics and identity are crucial to understanding the left responses to the new nationalism in Germany since 1989. The state and civil society shifts since 1989 from a post-national to an affirmative ethnic national identity is the context in which an explicitly anti-national political orientation emerges. Whew! So that's the end of that chapter. Thank you so much for listening. I also appreciate you listening to me look things up like you did. Where would I be without you?